Mosaic, a daily news program from Link TV, presents a selection of news reports from independent and state-controlled broadcasters from throughout the Middle East.
ونتحول إلى الشأن العراقي حيث قتل
In Iraq, 10 people were killed, including a child, in separate incidents. Meanwhile, the U.S. Army announced that it will transfer all the Iraqi detainees in the notorious Abu-Ghraib prison to other prisons that are currently being built. There are about 20,000 people behind bars throughout Iraq, and reservations remain about these prisons from Amnesty International.
تعددت الحوادث في العراق وامتدت على خارطة.
The number of attacks in Iraq has increased, and they are targeting civilians and military personnel. A suicide bomber in a booby-trapped car targeted an American and Iraqi security forces checkpoint in Fallujah, killing 11 people, including 5 police officers. The U.S. Army said that fire has erupted in an American tank when a bomb planted on a road east of Baghdad detonated. A booby-trapped car near the Isra Mosque, west of Baghdad, exploded, killing 3 people and injuring 10 others. The intensity of the explosion was so big, it caused damage to surrounding buildings. The Iraqi police said that a Sunni imam was killed when a booby-trapped car exploded in front of the mosque in Samarra, also killing 2 civilians. In Tikrit, 2 bombs exploded, killing a police officer and wounding 4 others. Washington's announcement that it will close down the Abu-Ghraib prison within 3 months did not please Iraqis, considering that other prisons would be opened in its place.
They should be giving us electricity, a sewage system, clean water, and fixing the roads. People are being killed and no one knows why. Are they trying to create divisions? How do we benefit from this? Abu-Ghraib will close down, but 1,000 other Abu-Ghraibs will be opened.
This prison, which was built by the British in the 1960s, has become a witness to prisoners' abuse. In the spring of 2004, pictures of abused prisoners were revealed, shedding light on the abuse scandal. It compelled the U.S. president to call for the destruction of this prison in hopes for erasing Iraqis' memories of U.S. forces' horrible practices.
Russian President Vladimir Putin visited Algeria today. It is the first visit of its kind for a Russian president in this country. The visit aims at strengthening economic relations between the 2 countries, especially with regards to the sales of Russian weapons to this former client of the Soviet Union. Putin's visit was expected on Thursday evening, but was postponed and shortened to 24 hours without giving any official explanation.
The Russian president's visit to Algeria, which comes in the framework of the Strategic Partnership Agreement signed in 2001, has opened up new horizons for bilateral trade and foreign investment. Many agreements in various areas were signed, which will help the 2 countries coordinate their efforts on the international front and exchange viewpoints on many current affairs.
On a political level, our relations are very good. We would like to strengthen our trade and economic relations to a desired level.
Because of the history of military relations between Russia and Algeria, the visit is an opportunity to negotiate a $4 billion military hardware deal in exchange for reducing part of Algeria's debt. Both sides are hoping that their bilateral trade agreements will lead to future political cooperation. Agreements between the 2 countries in the past did not exceed $360 million.
We finalized the list of
agreements that will be signed by Presidents Abdelaziz Bouteflika and Vladimir Putin. We agreed to enhance political and economic relations between our countries and to strengthen our trade relations. We also broached the subject of Iraq and the regional situation in the Middle East and the Iranian nuclear file.
While the Russian president is looking to reinforce relations with Algeria through his visit in light of U.S. hegemony in the region, Algeria, for its part, is seeking to use this Russian gesture to bolster its international position and increase the scope of foreign investments beyond those in its energy resources.
Moscow canceled Algeria's $4.5 million in debts today after an agreement was signed during Russian President Vladimir Putin's visit to Algeria.
The White House announced that the United States is seeking a diplomatic solution to the Iranian nuclear conflict. This solution, according to Washington, has to start not with imposing sanctions, but with a strong-worded statement by the Security Council. Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice accused Iran of being the central banker for terrorism in several parts of the world. Rice's statement comes after the Iranian administration's announcement that Iran will not yield to international pressure. The supreme leader of Iran's Islamic Revolution, Ali Khamenei, said that his country would forge ahead with the work toward mastering nuclear technology and will resist any threats by the West. Iranian officials vowed to retaliate against those who try to harm their country. The developments in this issue followed the International Atomic Energy Agency's transfer of Iran's nuclear file to the Security Council. The Security Council will look into the possibilities of making decisions in the Iranian case next week.
The war of words is raging between Iran and the United States after American threats, promises, and warnings of consequences that may include military action to stop Iran's nuclear research. Tehran maintained that it will not yield to pressure and will resume its uranium enrichment work for peaceful purposes. In light of U.S. recommendations that appear to have negative consequences, the Security Council, under American pressure, will look at a report that was handed over by the International Atomic Energy Agency after Russian and European mediation efforts failed. In response, Iran announced its decision, which was made not by any Iranian government official, but by the Islamic Revolution's supreme leader, Ali Khamenei. Persistence and forging ahead toward developing nuclear technology is the responsibility of Iranian officials in the midst of what Khamenei described a psychological war against Iran to weaken the religious leaders' authority in the country and their policy in the region, as well as to hinder the country from making any scientific progress. Iran's Islamic Front says that they will not stand for this humiliation. The days of terrorizing the nation are over, according to President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, who said his country is prepared to resist any political pressure, adding that Iran has information that could weaken the position of Western nations. Iran's warnings continued after the ambassadors of the Permanent Security Council members convened in order to come up with a new approach to Iran's nuclear situation.
The United States may have the power to cause harm and pain, but it is also susceptible to harm and pain. If the United States wishes to choose that path, we will also choose it. So let the ball roll and we'll see what happens.
The American response came quickly. U.S. Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice said Iran poses the #1 challenge to the United States.
We may face no greater challenge than from Iran, whose policies are directed at developing a Middle East that would be 180 degrees different than the Middle East we would like to see develop. This is a country that is determined to develop a nuclear weapon in defiance of the international community. It's a country that is the central banker for terrorism, whether that terrorism is in southern Iraq or in the Palestinian territories or in Lebanon.
In spite of the threats and counter-threats, a diplomatic solution to the mounting crisis is desired by all sides. The Permanent Council members discussed after their meeting a gradual approach by the Council to deal with the issue, hoping to convince the Iranians to cease all of their uranium enrichment activities. Russia had earlier refused any military solution to the conflict, especially since this situation reminds it of what preceded the war on Iraq in 2003.
We are convinced that there is no military solution to this crisis. This is also what Britain and Germany believe as announced by their ministers. I don't think sanctions as a means to solve a crisis has ever achieved its goal in recent history.
China, too, emphasized that reaching a solution should come through negotiations and has backed Russian and European efforts. This is also what the International Atomic Energy Agency and the European Union hope for, which in turn do not wish to see another war break out in the region. The statements made by the Europeans, the Russians, and the Chinese contradict the U.S. rush to impose international sanctions on Tehran. Iran sees this as a sign of goodwill and accepts the negotiation path, despite the fact that its file was turned over to the Security Council. The attempt to politicize the issue or to force Iran to give up its right to research is a matter that has already been decided by Ali Khamenei, who has the final word.
على صعيد آخر زارت قناة العالم موقع لافيزان.
Al Alam News Channel visited the Lavizan nuclear facility, where thousands of trees were allegedly cut down by the Iranian government to remove nuclear traces, according to some Western newspapers.
This is the highway to the Garden of Lavizan, which is also called the Lavizan Woods by locals due to its size. The garden stretches hundreds of hectares and was established 40 years ago northeast of the capital to be the source of fresh air to Tehran, which is considered one of the most polluted cities in the world. It gained international notoriety after its name became connected to the Iranian nuclear file, when Western powers accused Tehran of using its lush landscape to conceal its nuclear program. The last of these accusations was published in the British newspaper Daily Telegraph, which reported that according to Western intelligence sources, thousands of trees were cut down and many buildings were demolished to erase any trace of enriched uranium. At the location, we did in fact find stretches of land that were plowed and trees that were cut down. To find out the truth, we headed to the capital and spoke with the assistant city engineer of Tehran, Donya Mali, who was quite surprised by the accusations. Donya explained the reason behind cutting down the trees and said it was the subject of heated debates between the city council and the Iranian Department of Environment.
This project goes back to 1970 as part of a major plan to construct highways in Tehran. We are talking about one of the most heavily congested areas in the city. To solve this problem, we are constructing a new road that will connect Hamat and Zain Adin highways.
Moreover, the engineer overseeing the highway construction project denied that any buildings were demolished other than those mentioned in the Telegraph, which had reported that many trees and buildings were torn down.
The obstacles facing this project consist of 4,000 trees. We have cut down 2,400 so far. There are also several houses without permits that we may have to tear down after negotiating with the residents.
In these humbled houses, which stand in the way of completing the highway project, we found a more important file than the nuclear one. First, the residents' demands for satisfactory compensation from the city of Tehran before tearing down their houses. A spokesman for the Iranian government, Ghulam Hussein Imam, described the Western allegations about Lavizan as a joke.
This is a joke. The IAEA inspectors have combed the entire place. Comments like these are in denial of the expertise of the agency's inspectors.
The International Atomic Energy Agency inspectors visited the location several times before and maintained that they did not find any nuclear traces. These pine trees are accused today of being involved in the Iranian nuclear program. Whether these allegations are real or made in jest makes no difference. But how many of these allegations do countries like Iran have to answer in order to prove their innocence? Are they about judging intentions or looking at the facts on the ground? And will international organizations consider similar cases in other countries it dealt with in the past when they question the allegations' authenticity? Naveed Bahrouz, Al Alam Television, the Lavizan Woods.
named after the Lebanese national anthem, Kulluna lil Watan, is the latest movement to arise in the country. Lebanese intellectuals, media professionals, and militants from the group gathered yesterday at the Grand Plaza in Hamra and urged all Lebanese to solve the different conflicts peacefully. Yumna Tayyara reports on the non-political movement, which started a campaign dubbed Say No to War.
Their action started after hearing a common question from different Lebanese. How long should we remain holding our heart in our hands, frightened of the future? All for the Nation, Kulluna lil Watan, is a movement composed of Lebanese intellectuals, media professionals, and militants for a civil society. They stressed on the fact they were not a political party or a movement or represent a sect. They all joined forces to launch the campaign Say No to War against the initiation of a new civil war in Lebanon. For the moment, journalist Nasri Sayegh was been appointed as the coordinator in charge of following up this initiative. Yesterday's gathering was a chance for all those interested to propose ideas to see this campaign moving, as it had a limited time frame, 1 year. Either they succeed in waking up the Lebanese people or they fail. Sayegh said that they were starting late but tailed those who preceded them in calling against any form of violence. Sayegh added that Lebanese have every right to acquire different opinions, views and ideologies on important issues, but their duty would be to refute violence and all different acts that would generate violence to stop revival of another civil war. One of the movement's activists said their priority was to hinder the restart of the war, as the country have been witnessing some tension in the past year.
First of all, we want peace, peace for all Lebanese, peace for this country, because we had war. We know what the meaning of war. We don't want that war to repeat itself again. We see tension at a high level, and we see resentment among people. Yes, we don't have a war, but we have a lot of resentment and division between people, and we meant by this gathering to bring people together.
All for the Nation calls on all political forces to sign a treaty forbidding the use of violence in the language used in speeches, positions, and the streets. The movement also urges media institutions as well as educational institutions to publicize and spread the culture of non-violence. More than 700 people have joined in through a petition in less than 10 days. The course of activities that would be taken by the movement would include artistic activities, advertisement campaigns, and media coverage, anything that would raise the Lebanese conscience to refuse violence. Generous donors fund the movement's activities, as they stress that they do not accept any form of political money. 2 projects were set for implementation in the future that require a great deal of assistance from all Lebanese. The first is a trial of the past war, and the second is a project to remember and revive the aggressive memory of the civil war so it would not recur. Yumna Tayyara, Future TV, Beirut.
هدد يهود أولمرت رئيس الوزراء الإسرائيلي بالوكالة مجددا بعملية.
Acting Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Olmert renewed his threat to assassinate Palestinian Prime Minister Ismail Haniyeh if Israel is attacked. In a report published by the Israeli newspaper Yediot Ahronot, Olmert said that Haniyeh and other Palestinian leaders are not safe from similar assassinations. Preceding Olmert in using the language of assassination were Minister of War Shaul Mofaz and former head of the Internal Security Agency Avi Dakhtar. In protest of the Israeli policy of assassination, thousands of Palestinians demonstrated in Gaza after the Friday prayers. Nafid Azzam, the leader of the Palestinian resistance movement Islamic Jihad, stressed that the movement will continue its resistance until the Israeli occupation ends. In the village of Beit Sira near Ramallah, 8 Palestinians were injured in clashes between Israeli occupation forces and Palestinian and foreign peace activists. They were protesting the construction of the apartheid separation wall.
In response to the Israeli language of threats, the Hamas movement expressed its hope to achieve a real peace that is based on justice and ending the Israeli occupation on the Palestinian territories, as well as giving Palestinians their legal national rights. Khalid Mish'al, the head of the political office for the movement, in an interview before his delegation visit to Saudi Arabia, said that Israel must change its position and recognize Palestinian rights. He said in the interview that the movement will set forth a plan that will produce a real peace. Regarding the ceasefire, Mish'al said that the international community cannot ask only one side, the Palestinian side, to commit to the ceasefire because it is the weaker side. Rather, the community should ask the Israelis to commit as well. Concerning acting Israeli Prime Minister Ehud Olmert's plan to draw the permanent borders of Israel, Mish'al said that it would be considered a declaration of war on the Palestinian people, confirming that Olmert is repeating the same mistakes made by his predecessor, Ariel Sharon. Regarding the unilateral separation plan which Israel announced to withdraw from all areas where there are dense Palestinian populations, Mish'al said that this is not a peace, but a declaration of war against the Palestinian people, because this plan will lead to the continuation of the Israeli occupation on a large area of the West Bank, the continued presence of the apartheid separation wall, the continuation of settlement building, and the rejection by the Israeli authorities of compromising on Jerusalem or acknowledging the right of return for the Palestinian people. Mish'al said that this plan was launched under the pretext of considering Israel's security interests, meaning that Israel decides on its own what its security interests are, and it does not consider what is required to create a real peace that is based on a real withdrawal and an acknowledgement of Palestinians' national and legal rights.
Sharp reaction from both the left and the right today to the latest comments by acting Prime Minister Ehud Olmert. In a series of weekend newspaper interviews, Olmert pledged to define Israel's permanent borders by the year 2010. I believe, he said, that in 4 years' time, Israel will be disengaged from the vast majority of the Palestinian population within new borders and with the route of the fence, which has until now been a security fence, adjusted to the new borders. Olmert also promised to begin construction in the disputed E1 area between Jerusalem and Ma'ale Adumim. Meretz leader Yossi Beilin said in response, whoever proposes developing E1 is essentially preventing a permanent Israeli-Palestinian agreement. Likud Knesset member Uzi Landau reacted to Olmert's comments by saying, quote, this plan explains why Abu Mazen wants Olmert to win the elections. And Labour Party Chairman Amir Peretz warned that unilateral action by Israel would be a very serious mistake. For his part, Hamas political leader Khaled Mashal described Olmert's plan as, quote, a direct declaration of war against the Palestinians. Speaking to a French news agency, the Syrian-based Hamas leader said the plan only signifies the taking of unilateral steps enabling Israel to remain in most of the territories. Mashal claimed that Olmert is repeating the same mistakes Prime Minister Ariel Sharon made. Also reacting to Olmert's plan, Palestinian Prime Minister designate Ismail Haniyeh said Palestinians will not settle for anything less than a Palestinian state, which includes the West Bank and Gaza, with Jerusalem as its capital.
Palestinian women have played many roles despite the difficulty of living under occupation. Since the Hamas movement has taken over the Palestinian government through the legislative elections, a group of women have been able to acquire important positions in these Palestinian institutions. Every year, women throughout the world wait for March 8th. On this day, women make the repeated call to level the democratic playing field by achieving equality with men in all aspects of life. The feminist experiment in Palestine has taken a leading role in achieving progress and openness. Zacarias Moussaoui is an example of this. She is the first Palestinian woman to become a mayor. She is the mayor of the Beni Zaid village west of Ramallah. She ascended to this position by receiving the largest number of votes in the municipal elections.
Representing women in official positions is the key to achieving modernity and democracy, especially in Palestine. We have the honor in Palestine to make these achievements despite the fact that we live under occupation where our rights are taken away from us. We have been deprived of our rights on the political and national levels, but at the democratic level, we made achievements that we can be proud of.
On International Women's Day, Fathia gave all female public workers an official day off. However, she insisted on working from home where everyone testified to her seriousness and dedication to her work.
During this year, she really took hold of her work, and she was able to understand what needed to be done and what was required of her. Thank God, she is doing a good job and doing better.
The Palestinian woman is known to be courageous and determined. Many responsibilities have been put on her shoulders, whether she has taken on the role of father, son, or husband if they are arrested or martyred. This has made her a partner in the struggle with men. Her social responsibilities have paved the way for them to take on roles in organizational and administrative work.
Palestinian women have the right to be in decision and policy-making positions because historically she is a partner, whether in the struggle for freedom or in political or social life. Naturally, she must also be a partner in decision-making positions.
Nevertheless, many women's organizations are still dissatisfied with the level of women's participation in decision-making positions, which is important since it is the only way to pass gender equality laws in political participation.
Zacarias Moussaoui, the only person to be tried in the US for direct responsibility for the 9/11 attacks, is on trial for his life today. Here's more.
20th hijacker Zacarias Moussaoui is a French citizen of Moroccan descent. He's pleaded guilty to 6 counts of conspiracy over the 9/11 attacks, which killed about 3,000 people. His trial is setting a precedent. For the first time in court, the US government will detail how much it knew before the September 11th strikes. The trial will decide if he should receive the death penalty for failing to give investigators information which could have prevented the attacks. Moussaoui was in jail when the hijacked planes hit the World Trade Center and Pentagon in 2001. He'd been taking flying lessons in Oklahoma when his instructor became suspicious at his desire to fly large jets despite little flying experience. Moussaoui was reported to the authorities and arrested on immigration charges. At the trial in Alexandria, Virginia, US government prosecutors will argue he was part of the 9/11 conspiracy. They'll say that if he had not lied to investigators, the plot might have been uncovered. Prosecutors will say for this he deserves to die. When he pleaded guilty last year, Moussaoui said he was not meant to be part of the 9/11 terrorist team. He did, however, confirm that he'd pledged allegiance to Al-Qaeda and was guilty of a broad conspiracy to use aeroplanes as weapons. His defense team is expected to argue that even if he'd shared all he knew, government agents would not have acted properly on the information. The trial is expected to last between 1 and 3 months. Rigorous security measures are in place, and the jury will be anonymous.
UN envoy John Pronk on Tuesday cast doubt on prospects for a robust UN force in Sudan's troubled Darfur province, as he warned of growing anti-UN sentiment in Khartoum, fueled by fears of a conspiracy against the Arab Islamic world. Pronk, the UN Special Representative in Sudan, also cautioned that sending a NATO-led force to protect beleaguered civilians in the province would be a recipe for disaster. He spoke of rising anti-UN feelings in Khartoum, as authorities there fiercely oppose plans to replace an ineffective African Union force in Darfur by a mobile, more robust UN contingent.
The views expressed on Mosaic are not those of Link TV or its sponsors, but of the broadcasters themselves. Mosaic is made possible by a grant from the John S. and James L. Knight Foundation, which promotes journalism excellence worldwide and invests in the vitality of 26 U.S. communities, and the William and Flora Hewlett Foundation. Additional support is provided by the Firedoll Foundation and Henry and Virgilia Dakin.